Last minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. Is okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always
Nice,
as simple
Ryan.
as 1,
What's
2,
up?
3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
You're listening to the Peak Physique Podcast with Andre Adams on the NASM Podcast Network.
Hey guys, welcome back to the NASM Peak Physique Podcast. I'm your host, Andre Adams, NASM Master Trainer and IFBB Physique Olympian. Today we've got a concept I want to break down, and this was chosen by you based off of our Instagram poll, and that is the Setpoint theory in bodybuilding. If you work in other industries, even electronics or machinery, you might have heard of set points, but how does it relate biologically to our physiques? The Setpoint theory suggests that the body has a natural tendency to maintain a certain level of body weight, body fat, and these things are regulated by hormonal, metabolic, and neurological mechanisms. In the context of bodybuilding, this theory is often applied to muscle mass, body fat levels, and metabolic rate. And this can vary, right, depending on your genetics, your consistency, different adaptations that will occur throughout the course of your prep, and then whether we're in an off season or an on season. And I want to dive a little deeper there. Let's go deeper into how it relates specific to physique and bodybuilding. So number one on my list is always going to be muscle mass regulation. And there's a couple other previous episodes that we've done that I'll weave this back into. And, just as the body tries to maintain a certain body fat percentage, it also resists excessive changes in muscle mass. So any of you, especially if you're an ecto or ectomesomorph like myself, you've probably noticed that as you're trying to go through a bulk or an improvement phase, you get that initial, 5 to 10, maybe 15 pounds of muscle over the course of an off season. And all of a sudden you plateau and you get stuck, right? And it's like, wow, I can eat 8 times a day. I can have, extra carbs around my workouts. I can have a mass gainer shake in the middle of the night. And no matter what you do, you feel stuck. Well, a lot of that is the muscle mass regulation effect of set point theory, right? It's a certain homeostasis level that your body is accustomed to, it's adapted to, and that's where it's trying to self-regulate, right? So if you've ever been a particular muscle mass for a very long period of time, your body may fight further increases or decreases, but especially increases by slowing down muscle protein synthesis or even the recovery demands, right? So again, if you've plateaued, it could be that there's a slowing in MPS and your body is just trying to pump the brakes and really govern how much muscle you're able to pack on, right? And concepts like this is why progressive overload and periodization are necessary to force adaptations. I prefer undulating periodization. We just actually did an episode on undulating periodization and double progressions, for example. And these are things that will break down those plateaus, cause different types of adaptations to keep you progressing. One thing that I'd like to share too is I'll relate it back to my own personal experience and how my own set points have evolved over time. And that'll be one of the key takeaways for you guys today is knowing that set points, don't get discouraged, set points can change over time. If I take it all the way back to the beginning, you guys have probably heard my story in the early years. I actually started in powerlifting. And back then I was 165 pounds. I competed in the natural raw division, which means no supportive equipment and drug-free. And my body really, really liked that weight. It was hard, honestly, for me to move up or down in body weight. No matter what I did, if I ate 5 times a day or 7 times a day, if I did cardio or didn't do cardio, my body loved to stay at 165 pounds. And over time, that obviously shifted as I eventually shifted away from powerlifting, learned more about physique and bodybuilding, men's physique, and then ultimately classic physique came out. And those were divisions that I was able to grow into over time. But I stayed at 165 pounds for many years until men's physique came out. I earned my IFBB pro card, and my homeostasis weight, we'll call it my set point, then became 185 pounds for about the next 5 years until classic physique came out. And you guys that have followed me long enough probably seen a pretty crazy transformation. Took me about 18 months, but I went from 185 pounds to 243 pounds. And there was a whole lot of food, a whole lot of heavy lifting. And here was the key, right? The key wasn't just to pack on a bunch of adipose tissue and unnecessary weight, but it was building the density that I needed to be competitive in pro classic physique, but then also allowing my body to stay there long enough to fully get the most out of that adaptation, right? I like to stay at those higher weights towards the end of a bulk and, what we call quote unquote hardening up a bit. We're allowing our physique to get acclimated to carrying that extra weight. We're also doing some metabolic building there. So I might hold that weight, but then actually start to progress my energy output. So maybe it's a little more cardio, higher volumes back in the gym, and I'm feeding myself more calories. So we're driving up that BMR and total daily energy expenditure. We're feeding the body more calories before we start our cut. So there's multiple reasons we stay there, but ultimately we're adapting the set point, right? Now, if I fast forward to 2025, I'll actually be, I hate to give my age away, but I'm actually going to be 40 here very soon. And at near 40, my body loves to stay at about 220 to 225 pounds. Very easy for me to maintain. I remember in the early years, I would have given anything to be able to just get up to 225 pounds. And now I don't have to do much of anything. So my set point has certainly adapted over the years to the heavier weight. And same thing when I'm coaching my clients. I prefer to hold our athletes at that, we'll call it the tail end of a bulk phase, and do a bit of a hardening up in a metabolic building phase to really allow their bodies and the homeostasis levels to adapt to this higher set point and ultimately, prepare them for the season to come. But over time, it does make it easier to maintain those gains. Number 2 on my list is going to be metabolic adaptations during cutting and bulking, right? So you heard me mention metabolic building. When we are dieting down for a competition, the body often fights fat loss by slowing down metabolism, increasing hunger hormones like ghrelin, and decreasing satiety hormones like leptin, okay? So one thing that you should be conscious of for sure is a down regulation effect of thyroid hormones, T3, TSH, right? These things that maybe were in an excellent position at the beginning of prep need to be more aggressively supported through things like mineral balancing and diet to make sure that we don't get, set points driving the wrong way, right? We don't want to slow the metabolism down. We want to maintain it, keep it firing high to allow us to get stage lean or into stage condition. So that's one thing to be aware of is the metabolic adaptation. On the flip side, during a bulk, the body may also resist excessive weight gain by increasing thermogenesis. So that's going to be calorie burning through, NEAT, a non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, and other factors, right? So again, you get the opposite effect when you're bulking. It's trying to slow things down, or it's trying to speed things up, to hold a little bit lighter body weight. And when you are in a severe deficit for a very long period of time, the metabolic adaptation is working the other way. It's trying to slow everything down to preserve your mass. And this is also why, when we're talking about bodybuilding specific, why reverse dieting and controlled bulks can really help reset the set point over time. And this is done with a controlled progressive adaptation, right? You don't want to come out of a show and eat like crazy, right? You're highly susceptible to fat gain immediately post competition. And it needs to be a nice controlled reverse diet because we want a nice progressive and linear adaptation to that set point. And it does take time for your body to catch up. And if there's one thing that I can, that I really want to just instill in you guys is that your body is always in a state of adaptation. whether we're going up or down, your body's always catching up. And a lot of times, even with our progress photos, our physique check-ins, what you're seeing today, if you do a check-in right now, this moment, we're actually seeing the result of things that we probably started 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks ago, and your body's adapting to those variables. So just keep that in mind, right? Metabolic adaptations will occur whether you're in a cut or a bulk, and we need to address those and support different functions in the body that ultimately support our goals, push us closer to that bulk or closer to that stage conditioning. Number 3 is going to be breaking through plateaus. Now, you guys heard about some of the different training strategies and mechanisms we have with, progressive overloading, double progressions, all that good stuff. But let's talk about how we can leverage Setpoint for breaking through plateaus. If a physique athlete is stuck at a certain level of muscle mass or leanness, the Setpoint theory suggests that the body is resisting change, right? That's what we call the plateau. Now, some techniques to overcome this would include things like progressive overloading. And again, this can be increasing volume, intensity, weight, duration. It depends on what the specific outcome we're trying to achieve and what variables we choose to progress. Dietary adjustments, adjusting macros or calorie cycling, right? You guys are probably familiar with carb cycling. And, there's many, many, many other techniques we could use for diet, but also supplementation. Micronutrition would fall into the same category. So again, we can cause different adaptations through macro and micro nutrition. Strategic refeeds would fall into that same category. Or even maintenance phases or deload phases, right, to gradually reset the body's baselines. A few things I'd like to mention in there too would also be biohacking, right? So when we talk about how to break through our plateaus, there are so many new ways of doing things that probably didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago, from things like hormone therapies, right, where maybe we're fighting genetics, we're fighting age. Peptide therapies, you have SARMs and SERMs, GLP-1s, you've got receptor agonists, all kinds of different tools that people might leverage, for biohacking, right? To, again, break through a plateau and force an adaptation in the body. Many different things we can do there. And when we're talking about also, restricting or your body fighting a bulk, for instance, if you guys recall one of our episodes on myostatin, right, the role of myostatin when it comes to bodybuilding, it's really governing the amount of muscle mass. So myostatin is one of those inhibitory, or we'll call it an antagonist to MPS, muscle protein synthesis. It's going to hold your body at a certain amount of mass and try to downregulate that. So again, when we're talking biohacking, things like follistatin or other ways to, try to inhibit or drive down myostatin could be beneficial. Guys, if you're just joining us, welcome back to the Peak Physique Podcast. Today, we are talking about the Setpoint theory for bodybuilding and physique athletes. And we're giving you guys some concepts that you might be able to leverage for your own preps or any of your clients. The fourth thing I want to talk about on my list today is the potential to shift your set point, right? With consistent training, proper nutrition, long-term adherence, bodybuilders can literally reprogram the body to accept a new set point. I told you guys, if you tuned in a little earlier, mine is currently around 220 to 225 pounds. For many years, it was 185. For many years before that, it was 165. So you can literally retune or recalibrate your body's set point and cause those adaptations through, again, consistent training, nutrition, and long-term adherence. Over time, maintaining a lower body fat percentage or higher muscle mass becomes easier as the body adapts both hormonally and metabolically. A good example of that could also be, if I think right now, very popular bodybuilder, let's take Kai Green, right? I don't know how old Kai is these days, but Kai's got to be in his upper 40s. And if you look at him, Kai hasn't stepped on stage since 2016, almost a decade ago, but he still looks 90 to 95% as good as he did when he was competing. Why is that? Well, again, his set point is now accustomed to carrying that amount of mass and that amount of conditioning, right? The lower percent body fat, that is his set point. So it's going to be much, much easier for him to maintain this through proper nutrition and just maintaining consistency in his training regimen, his cardio regimen, versus the difficulty he probably experienced over, the 10 to 15 years prior as he was initially building that frame. So again, it's the potential to shift that set point. It does become easier once you cause those adaptations to maintain a higher or lower percent body fat, depending on what you do most consistently. And I want to go deeper with that concept. Let's talk more about adjusting the set point. I'm going to use fat loss as the example here, right? So when dieting, again, the body is going to fight back. We're trying to, go through a recomp, reduce our percent body fat, see our body weight starting to trend down over time. The body's going to fight back to some extent with some metabolic adaptations, including slowed metabolism, increased hunger, decreased energy levels. Am I ringing a bell? Does that sound familiar to anyone who's been dieting lately? I know that definitely hits home for me. And the goal is to really avoid an extreme metabolic response while maintaining fat loss. So again, what can we do to support or combat some of the unwanted adaptations, right? We actually want our set point to remain high when we're talking about metabolism. And things like that could be, a slow controlled fat loss that's going to help mitigate some of the downregulation of metabolism. I like to aim for 0.5 to 1.0% body weight loss per week. If you're checking percent body fat specifically on an in-body or a DEXA, I aim for about similar, actually 0.5% to 1% body fat loss per week. And you can kind of math it out to say, hey, 24% body fat, I need to get down to 8% body fat. And you can start to math it out and see how many weeks plus or minus you think you're going to need to get into contest shape. All right, other strategies could be refeeds and diet breaks. So I call diet breaks, and this could be, maybe one day a week. It could be, a full week every 8 weeks, but however you want to slice it, I like to call those defeed periods, right? So with the refeeds, those are going to be periodic high carb refeeds, generally 1 to 2 days per week, or diet breaks. Maybe you've been prepping aggressively to get in show shape, and it's been 10 to 12 weeks straight dieting. We might want to do a deload week where we start to reduce your inputs. We might reduce your cardio and training volumes, bring your calories back up to maintenance. We would consider that a diet break. And that could be maybe a 1 to 2 week period, again, to really help your metabolism, help your set point stay firing at a very high level, right? And that's going to also help prevent leptin from dropping too much, keeping your metabolism higher and more active. And we can also leverage those defeeds we talked about and deload periods strategically based on biomarkers. So with a lot of my athletes, as we are going throughout a contest prep, we're tracking things like, resting heart rate. We're tracking overnight HRV. If you've got an Oura Ring, Apple Watch, Fitbit, I've got my Garmin on, shout out to Garmin. Any of these can actually help the coach understand how the athlete's central nervous system, how their adrenal glands, and their overall sensitivity is, their recovery is progressing. And if we feel like we're starting to approach burnout, for instance, that would be a good time to implement maybe a diet break or a deload. Resistance training focus, right? We're going to keep lifting heavy during a cut to preserve muscle mass and maintain metabolic rate. By continuing to lift, similar weights as you did early in prep, it's also going to help you maintain maximum hypertrophy and muscle fullness. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to, try and PR as we're heading into a show. That's not the goal by any means. But, if your body is accustomed to lifting a certain amount of weight, let's take the bench press, and you're used to lifting 225 pounds for 10 reps on bench press. Later in prep, I would expect that we're still in a similar ballpark, right? Somewhere around 225 pounds and maybe still in that 8 to 10 rep range to maintain, again, muscle hardness, fullness, and density. It's also going to help maintain a higher metabolic rate. Cardio periodization is another one. Avoiding excessive cardio at the start of a cut. And then it should be a gradual, generally in an ideal world, linear increase. And, this could be LISS, so low intensity steady state, could be MISS, moderate intensity, or it could be HIIT, high intensity interval training. You have to, again, get really hyper specific to your client, the goals, their schedule, how much time, right? Do they have a time to do an hour of fasted cardio, low intensity, or do we need to shorten that to 25 to 30 minutes of HIIT based on their schedule, right? So again, make this hyper customized to the individual based on their schedule, their abilities, and their goals. Post-cut maintenance. So let's talk about reverse dieting. So after our show or our season is done and we're going into that initial reverse diet, we want to slowly increase the calories. By slowly, we're talking, roughly 100 to 150 calories per week. And again, this can vary by the individual, but it should be slow and progressive. And this is going to help prevent rapid fat gain, because you guys have to remember, post-competition, your body is literally primed for fat gain. A lot of people think, hey, I'm going to slam a bunch of food, increase my calories back to before prep started, and I'm going to pack on all this muscle. But the reality is your metabolic rate has now slowed. Your set point's a little bit lower, and now you're susceptible to fat gain. So we need to be very sensitive and cautious with a slow linear progression on calories. And, we can also shift a higher percentage of those calories to protein intake in those initial phases. So higher than, the RDA for an average person who is not a bodybuilder, we're going to be up in that 2.2 to 2.6 gram per kilogram range to preserve muscle. And again, that number can vary a bit depending on how much muscle density, kidney function, and other variables of how much protein is appropriate for that individual. One other thing I like about shifting to a little bit higher percentage protein, at the very end of a prep or coming out of a prep, is it actually helps the body produce more urea and ultimately ammonia. And if you're taking things like citrulline and arginine, where you have a high rate of ammonia clearing, this can actually help reduce your extracellular water retention. So the inflammation, the puffiness, right, the kind of sub-Q puffiness that you feel, especially post-show where you're very inflamed, that little bit of higher percentage protein, if your kidneys and everything are functioning great, can actually help reduce some of that inflammation and extracellular water retention. The last thing on post-cut maintenance is really keep the training volume and intensity high to encourage the body to adapt to that new lean state. And again, that's what I call the quote unquote hardening up phase. So keep your training intensity high. Don't cut your weight in half and do 25 to 30 reps, right? We need to actually still be putting that stimulus on the muscle to achieve maximum hypertrophy, fullness, and density. All right, the second scenario, let's shift gears. We're going to go to set point, adjusting the set point for maximum muscle growth. The body resists excessive muscle gain, as we mentioned earlier, by downregulating muscle protein synthesis and increasing metabolic demands. This is also governed by myostatin. So again, I want you guys to go back, search for Peak Physique Podcast episode on myostatin and follistatin. And we've got some nuggets of information in there that will help you better understand and do a deep dive on that specific. But really the key is to progressive overload and optimize hormones over a length of time, right? So strategies to shift to a higher set point for muscle mass. I want you guys thinking about the lean bulking approach, right? I don't believe in the, kind of sloppy, let's gain 50 pounds in the off season. Now, if you're able to gain 50 pounds of muscle, hats off to you. I want to know the secret. You guys let me know when you figure that one out. But in reality, we're normally not going to be able to pack on that much actual muscle, right? And we do want to minimize unnecessary body fat and water retention. So, avoid the dirty bulking, keep it clean, and aim for a nice controlled linear approach about, 0.25 to 0.5 pounds per week. Even up to 1 pound of mass for you bigger guys is appropriate. Nutrient timing optimization, we can prioritize pre, intra, and post-workout carbs, amino acids, especially EAAs, and then proteins. This is going to help fuel training and enhance your recovery. And I'm going to give you guys another little pro hack. This is a personal one of mine. all you guys on Team Adams will be familiar with it, but a lot of the more recent case studies actually indicate that, taking vitamin D with a quarter teaspoon of sea salt pre or post workout can significantly increase muscle protein synthesis. So I hope you guys got your notepads out, but I'm going to go ahead and recommend, 2,000 to 5,000 IU of vitamin D3 with K2 for absorption, and then a quarter teaspoon of sea salt around your workout time to help increase NPS. And with any supplementation, always check with your, double check with your medical care provider if you're unsure if that would be appropriate for you. But that's one of my personal hacks that I like to share. All right, next thing for strategies to shift to a higher set point for muscle mass. Again, I can't stress enough how important recovery and sleep is. We got to make sure we prioritize this, right? Poor sleep increases cortisol. Cortisol, in turn, breaks down muscle tissue, right? Muscle catabolism, or MPB, muscle protein breakdown, and it actually increases the amount of visceral fat, belly fat storage overnight. So I want you guys aiming for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. Try to get your REM stages in, your deep sleep scores up. HRV, heart rate variability, should be trending up over time. A good low resting heart rate, let's say around 60 beat per minute or less. And I think that's definitely going to help take your recovery and your muscle gains to the next level. Next thing on our list is going to be progressive overloading. So again, consistently increasing the weights, volume, intensity, and really forcing the body to adapt to new muscle mass. So make sure that you're keeping those progressions in over time. That's going to help bust through those plateaus and elevate your set point. Maintenance phases. So after bulk, again, this is the hardening up phase I talked about. That's really holding at your new weight. I'd like to say, just good rule of thumb, 4 to 6 weeks, right? That's a pretty good amount of time to help your body accept or get accustomed to this heavier weight, right? There's a lot of different things that affect your systems, right? I mean, there's even more volume of blood in the body to support this. There's more oxygen capacity. There's more, all kind of things that change as you pack on more size and density. So I like to stay at that weight for minimum 4 to 6 weeks before I transition into any kind of cut. Or we could be staying there 4 to 6 weeks to harden up a bit, let your metabolism catch up, and then we might hit the gas and continue to grow, right? So this, again, depends on the client's goals. But one good indicator would be, is your appetite increasing, right? So as you're growing and your body's adapting, you're holding at the new weight, are you noticing an increase in your strength and your appetite? That combination is a good indicator. It's a good proxy that lets me know your BMR is now increasing and your body is adapting, your metabolism is catching up. And a couple things there, footnotes for you guys to monitor. If you put on an extreme amount of weight, especially in the off season, definitely monitor your blood work, your blood pressure, red blood cells, all the things that have to accommodate this heavier mass. Always good practice. And then the third category we're going to touch on here before we go into our final takeaways is the psychological adaptations, right? That's going to be training the mind and body. So your body adapts not just physically, but also hormonally and psychologically. What I mean by that, cravings, energy levels, mood, motivation, all affected by set point shifts. So again, we have to be thinking holistically, not just on the physical or physiological change, but psychologically, how is this going to affect us? So some things that we need to be cognizant of are mental and hormonal strategies, mindful eating, appetite control, managing our ghrelin, our hunger hormone, with balanced meals, right? So mixed macro meals that are going to be nutrient dense in protein, fiber, healthy fats. These are going to sustain us and provide more satiety so that we're not, feeling ravenous all day. And sometimes you want to feel ravenous, right? If you really need to pack on some muscle and you struggle with appetite, you might want to stimulate these things, but not to the extent that you feel like you're going to cheat on your diet every day. All right. Along with that, psychological factors would be stress management. So managing chronic stress levels, again, cortisol, right? Stress and strain on the adrenals. Again, these are things that we need to be aware of psychologically because they do have physiological impacts, right? Those are going to promote fat storage. They're going to promote muscle protein breakdown, and some things you can use to help aid in stress management would be things like red light therapy, contrast therapy, infrared sauna, cold plunge, things where we're, really waking up the parasympathetic rest and relax part of our nervous system. Meditation, deep breathing or box breathing is excellent. And then some active recovery techniques to really just help regulate stress levels and stress hormones. Consistency over time. This is another one. This comes down to your daily habits and routines. Hold yourselves accountable, work with a coach. It does take several months for a new set point to become established. So stay, and I say months, but honestly, this could be years too. But stay consistent, and this will help you guys to solidify those long-term changes. My final takeaways that I want you guys to leave here with today: set points are adaptable. So that's good news. If you feel stuck, no need to worry. We can shift those set points over time. While the body tries to resist change in muscle mass and body fat, long-term adherence and proper training, nutrition, and recovery can definitely effectively shift the body's baselines and homeostasis levels. For fat loss, set point shift, we're going to implement slow, structured fat loss with maintenance phases to stay lean. With muscle gain, set point shift, we're going to gradually add muscle while minimizing fat gain and solidifying that new muscle mass with maintenance phases or hardening up phases. And then with long-term adaptations, it does take time, but with persistence, your body will adapt to its new normal or its new set point. Guys, if you want to hear more about this topic or any other topics, please feel free to contact me. You can reach out to me via email at trainingbydre@gmail.com, on my websites, andreadamsofficial.com or teamadamsprep.com, and on YouTube or Instagram at andreadams_official. Guys, as always, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you guys on the next episode of the Peak Physique Podcast.